This is Blue Left, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the underrepresented Democratic voices in Tennessee, working tirelessly to bring progressive change to the volunteer state. Here's your host, Peggy Kingsbury.
Well, hey, everybody. That's right. From grassroots organizers to community leaders, from urban centers to rural towns, we'll highlight the diverse perspectives and powerful voices that often go unheard. Join us as we lift up the blue wave and shine a light on the path toward a more inclusive and equitable Tennessee. Again, I'm your host, Peggy Kingsbury, and this is Blue Lift, where every voice matters. Let's get going. Friends, I have a really great guest with us today. My friend Robert McNamara is here with us. How are you doing, Robert?
I am doing very well.
Good. I'm excited to have you here. We're going to talk about Robert's family in just a minute because you're going to be shocked and amazed at the size of this family that Robert comes from. But he is a military veteran, so thank you for your service very much.
Thank you.
Your work experience, you started out working on cars as a kid, and you wound up with a long career with General Motors. So
that's right.
That clearly was what you were meant to do.
34 and a half years with GM.
That's great. And you're retired from that now.
I am, yeah.
That's amazing. And of course, you've lived in Michigan because who works for Jim? Who hasn't at some point?
Correct.
Made their way through Michigan. And now you live here in Williamson County. And I know that you and your husband have redone an old farmhouse that's probably a lifelong project. What year was that house built? You said the...
Oh, let's see. It was, it's over 100 years old. I think it was built in 1916, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I bet it's really cool looking. There are a lot of those around here.
There are.
In Williamson
Yes.
County, which is just amazing.
Yes.
So Robert is also the founder and chair of the Franklin Pride. Am I saying that right? Is it an association or a group or?
Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me put this into airplane mode. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, I am the founding president of Franklin Pride, which is a 501c3.
Amazing. And we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about how that came about and how it's doing today and what the plans are for the future.
Sure.
But first, I think my listeners are going to be really excited to talk about your family. Now, when I got your bio, I had to read the sentence twice. You are the 9th child in a family of 17.
That's correct, yes.
So you're telling me your mother had 17 children?
17, single birth.
Single
Yes.
birth. No twins, no triplets,
twins.
quadruplets, no. Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
It is.
My husband is from a Catholic family, and he is the oldest of 7. Mm-hmm. So that just pales in comparison to what
but that's still a big family.
Yeah. But did your parents get like a school bus and drive you all around?
Station wagons. Yeah. And back then, there weren't even seat belts. You
Right.
just everybody piled in the back seat, and there was a Vista Cruiser. There was a seat that faced backwards.
Right. I remember those.
The the lights around the top, the windows, those little top windows. And yeah, we just piled in and went on our merry way.
How? What is the age span between the youngest and the oldest?
I think there's 21 years, I think.
Okay. So at any given time, she didn't have all little kids. There were some older, some younger,
Some other caretakers, or some, babysitters,
right,
built-in babysitters.
Right. And that's sort of how it was in my husband's family. As the older ones got older, they could make their own lunch for school, et cetera, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But wow, 17. Now, how big was the house you all lived in?
Well, I always thought it was very big, but when, as an adult, when I went back, it wasn't that big. It was probably, I think, less than 2,000 square feet. It was,
how many bathrooms did it have?
1.5.
How many sisters do you have?
The half didn't go in until I was probably into junior high.
How many sisters do you have?
There's 7. 10 boys, 7 girls.
I bet there were some big fights over that bathroom, weren't there?
Surprisingly, we made it work. I don't know. Of course, the boys could just, pee behind a bush.
Right.
That kind
that's
of thing.
What you do. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. And I mean, you all were literally, a school.
Right. We had.
But you went to Catholic school, didn't you?
No. There was no. It was a small town. There was no. Yeah.
It was a small town, but there were at least 18 McNamaras there, right? 16 of y'all and your mom and dad.
Right.
What did your dad do for a living?
He was a car salesman for GM. He sold a lot of cars.
Wow. Well, he had to. He had a lot of mouths to feed.
He was a very good salesman. Yeah.
And your mom, I guess she stayed home.
She stayed at home and
did all the things.
Did a lot of work.
Wow. Yeah. Did she make one trip to the grocery store a week, or was it?
Pretty much Wednesday. Every Wednesday was grocery day, and she would come home, and because it was S&H Green Stamp Day too.
Oh yes.
It was double S&H.
So she might come home with towels and pots and pans too.
But we would just bag after bag. It was the paper bags. We carried it all in.
My goodness. And she went shopping by herself, grocery shopping by herself.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just easier. She knew what she wanted and needed. And
12 loaves of bread, 42 gallons of milk.
she made it look easy. She was very well organized. And,
that's amazing. Well, that's an interesting thread then, because my husband's mother, she's passed away now, but she was the same, very organized and very methodical about things. And she was a tiny, tiny woman as well. But she had some general in her. When she spoke, everybody listened, and she was she was a still magnolia, but she was a New Yorker. Very interesting. So. Well, that's cool. And so this was in Eaton Rapids, Michigan, which I think is a bigger place now than it was when you were growing up, right?
Not much.
Oh, really?
It's grown some, but not that much. It's still a pretty small town. It's a bedroom community. And Lansing is, 20 miles south of Lansing, which isn't really that big of a city either, even though it's the capital.
Notable. And is there a big university in Lansing?
Michigan State.
Yeah, that's when I was kind of joking when I was in there. Michigan State people are going to be, I can't believe you had to ask that.
Spartans.
Yes, I knew. But I will note you are not wearing green today.
I am not.
No. Well, let's talk about the LGBTQ plus movement in Franklin, Tennessee. I want to start that conversation, though, with talking to you about your personal journey as a member of that community. When did you know that you were gay?
I guess the first I knew, looking back, I've known since second grade. And I know that. I remember sitting in the church pew, and we had gotten a new priest, and I just had the hots for the priest. And, at such a young age. Well, you're saying that, and I know, and some people are going to go, "Oh my God!" But it's just like a second grader having a crush on her teacher. Yeah, exactly.
A second grade little boy may have a crush on Mrs. Jones in the second grade because she's pretty.
At that point, I didn't have the words or whatever. I wasn't like, oh la 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 la.
No, but it was just like,
but I really
he's cute.
did. It was amazing. Yeah, he was just awesome, and
So you suspected then? Did you voice that to anyone in your family?
No, I did not. I suppressed it. I went through being in the Catholic Church, and I just somehow knew it wasn't right, or didn't think it was right. So I just kind of suppressed my whole sexuality from that day forward until I didn't really come out until I was 21.
So you went through your teenage years and never said anything to anyone.
Right.
Are any of your siblings also gay?
Yes. I have a sister that has come out, a younger sister that came out several years after I was out.
Okay. And do you think your parents had any suspicion about it when you were a teen?
I think they knew that I was. I remember one very good indication was that when I was actually going to have a date with a girl, and I was going to borrow the station wagon, so my dad had the younger brothers wash the car, and I heard him say, I was down the driveway doing something, but I heard him say, lay that back seat down. So he was hoping that I would get laid.
Yeah. He was
if it
hoping
had been one of the other brothers, he would make sure that seat was up,
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So you then, after you graduated from high school, did you go straight into the military?
I did.
Okay.
Pretty much. I had a job for 6 months or so, and then the little factory that I worked at, everybody was going to parachute skydiving. So I went and I loved it. And then I joined the Army after that.
Wow. So you joined the Army because parachuting was fun.
Yes. So I was going to join the Airborne, and then I didn't. Once I got into the Army, I didn't pass the physical training test. So they just put me into the infantry.
And this was towards the end of the Vietnam War, is that right?
Correct. The war was over. We still had troops. So this was in 1974 when I enlisted. It was a volunteer army.
Okay.
But it was still considered Vietnam era because we still had troops there.
Right. Yeah. And you did 4 years of service. Did you do that in the U.S. or did you go overseas? Germany. I
started in Louisiana. I did my training in Louisiana and then went to Germany for 3 years.
Okay. So in the mid-'70s, there was no way that someone could be outwardly gay and in the military, correct?
Correct.
So you still didn't say anything to anybody.
That's right. That's right. And I still really hadn't ever, had sex with anybody or, just, or with men anyway.
And you just hadn't said to yourself yet, I'm a gay
that's
man.
Right. I hadn't come out to myself yet.
And when did that happen?
I think toward the end of my, I did 3 years in Germany and came back and was still 6 months in Louisiana. And I kind of tested the waters just before I got out of the Army. Mm-hmm. And then I was still in denial. And even, when I got out of the Army and moved back to Michigan and, messed around a couple of times and still it didn't feel right. I had to struggle with, I don't know what the struggle was, but it took a little bit for me to really realize that I am gay. I went back to the church. That didn't work. Then, I went and, met somebody else and, so it was a
so your
process
journey, your journey was trying to be okay with it yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So apparently I had some internal homophobia, myself that I built up over the years or whatever. So it took me a minute to figure it out. How
did your parents react?
I never really did come out to them. They knew, and once I finally came out to myself, and I came out to other siblings, but I never told my parents. And my dad was quite a bit older, and one of my siblings suggested, maybe just let him ride this out in peace. But they've known, and they even knew before I did, I guess. They suspected.
Right.
And then whoever I was dating was always welcome. So it's not like they didn't know, but it was never said. It was unspoken.
Yeah, it's not sit down on the sofa, I want to talk to you kind of thing. Yeah, like we see on the sitcoms. Interesting. And then at some point you became an activist for the gay community. When did that happen?
I guess that kind of happened over the years. I started not necessarily for the gay community. I was just for liberal rights in general, women's rights, and anti-war, so whatever. I just was always out protesting something, including gay rights. But I think I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for a little while, and my first big protest was at Piedmont Park in Atlanta, and it was a women's health issues, and I talked to so many people there and heard their stories, and just sympathized with them and with human and equal rights. I've just always,
And it is interesting and true that when we're a part of a community that is discriminated against and feared, then we it's a very easy step for us to take up for a member of another community that may be feared. And I think that's interesting as we're talking here. I'm thinking that, what is more difficult is someone, I was going to say like myself, but I am a woman, but let's say your average heterosexual white male of means. It's very hard to get that person to be a huge advocate for underrepresented, misrepresented, and discriminated against communities. Now, I'm married to someone who is that person, and he is very active for others because he's a good and caring and kind and decent person.
Right.
But it would be beautiful if, I think, if we could see more of that.
Yes.
But it's like once we've determined in our minds someone is a part of the other, then their struggles don't matter to us.
Unfortunately.
But we're all God's creation if you're a believer, and we should all feel the pain of others.
Exactly. And that's what bothers me is how people don't see that, the empathy is not there for these other people, until it happens to me, it's not my fight, what you just said, and that's not right. It's everybody's fight. We're all citizens. We're all in the same boat. What separates me from them is only who I love.
That's right.
And everything else is the same.
That's right. That's right.
Same struggles and the same issues. And
we saw that, in America, we saw that in the civil rights movement as well. It was always an exception to see white faces as part of that movement. But then when their numbers began to swell and grow, you did see some change coming about. So we've got to figure out a way to harness that right now.
The allies, every movement needs you have to have allies. Right. To move forward.
I'm gonna talk to you about allyship here in just a moment, because that's one of the big things that we want to talk about. Growing up in a family of 17. Everyone vies for their parents to notice them. How did you get noticed with that many kids?
I didn't. I didn't. I kind of slid through the crack. I really didn't. When the younger kids were doing something fun, I was always too old. When the bigger kids were doing something, I was too young. That being said, I still had a pretty healthy, happy. We played so much. It was big yard, ice skating. Kickball, baseball,
all the things,
everything.
Yeah.
And it's such so many people to play with. Well, there was always something happening.
You not only had your own team. You had the entire tournament. you had your team and your opponent's team.
Well, but the neighbors would all come over too. So we had a pretty active. Ball teams and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Well, it's just to I'm sure you've heard a lot of jokes and people talking about being the middle kid, but my goodness, to be the middle kid out of 17, that's quite the thing. I applaud your ability to live through that.
Well, thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about once you got into Middle Tennessee. What year did you move to Nashville?
91.
So were you married at the time?
No.
So a gay man moves to Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, I did have a partner. I moved here with a partner.
Moved here with a partner from Michigan.
No, from Atlanta.
From Atlanta. Yeah. Okay. Bigger city.
Yes.
How did that go when you showed up in Nashville?
I loved it. I really loved it right from the start. My partner didn't. He ended up going back. He was from Georgia. I met him because I was laid off from GM and lived in Atlanta for a period of time before coming here. He hated it, but I loved it. And
did you feel accepted right away?
Yes, in Nashville I did, and it pretty much, and at work too. I didn't try to hide who I was. I didn't just come out and say, "Hey, I'm gay," but I didn't try to hide it either.
Right. Right.
And so, 90% of the people there accepted me. There were some people, it's like, oh, I'm not going to work with him, can't do it. So there was a little bit of discrimination, but nothing major.
Interesting.
Plus the union,
when you have the union
I had the union and
protections.
had my back. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. And then you wound up living in Williamson County. When did that move happen?
Yeah, that happened about 10 years ago, I guess. When I met my husband, Tom Rice, I had a house in East Nashville, and he lived on the west side, but he owned property here in Williamson County, which was the house we spoke about earlier, that was gutted. And it had been sitting there empty. So we just talked about moving out there, renovating the house. So we spent several years renovating that house. And then about 10 years ago, we moved out here.
Okay.
Maybe 11 years, I guess now.
Well, and when you moved here about a decade ago, Williamson County was different than it is now.
Yeah.
It's grown a lot, but also I think it was more diverse as far as progressive, versus conservative. There was I think a very, very healthy blend at that point in Williamson County. Would you agree?
I wasn't really plugged in, and when I was kind of skeptical of moving out here, I thought, well, we'll go here for a year, live there for a year, and then move back to Nashville.
Yeah.
But we ended up staying. So my perception of Williamson County was, straight, homophobic, very Republican. That was my perception. And so when we got here, I started showing up at the Democratic Party's coffee clutch,
right.
And started meeting people there, and eventually, became part of the executive committee and a district captain through the Democratic Party. Headed up the diversity team, where we had a couple of Diversity Day celebrations at Pinkerton Park, and I think when I moved here, I felt like I had to step up because I'd always lived in like Lansing, Atlanta, Nashville. There was
right.
always
more metropolitan areas.
So I was always just kind of the backseat activist. But once I moved out here, I felt like it was my duty, or obligation to stand up and to fight.
There, for the listeners who don't know, and I believe that Williamson County is so interesting because when you moved here a decade ago, it was pretty easy to pull together a diversity day, et cetera. And Williamson County has now gone sort of back to the place that you just described. In some ways, we are more unaccepting of underrepresented communities than we were before.
Yeah.
And it seems that after this last election, the bar didn't move on that at all, really.
No.
Unfortunately, it did not. And so I know that the struggles as a gay couple in Williamson County must be hard at this point. Have you thought about leaving?
No. We've talked about it a couple of times, but not to the point where we actually would. We love the house, and we've met some incredibly wonderful people here. So we have a great network of friends that would be hard to leave.
Right.
And why should we? It's.
I understand.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. Beautiful setting, and and we shouldn't have to leave. I mean, if it comes to the point where it becomes unsafe, of course we'll go somewhere. But
and of course, so the listeners know, I didn't just pull that question out of thin air. I think Robert and I both know gay couples who are leaving.
Have already.
It's been
left.
a big topic in the community,
yes.
and I've seen that on the socials, as they say.
Because for several years, the legislature has passed a lot of hateful legislation toward the gay community, especially the trans community, and
I don't see that getting any better. They still have their supermajority.
No, it's going to get worse. I think it feels like it's going to get worse. So it makes it very rough, and many people have moved. Several people that I know have moved, to a blue state just because they can't handle the hateful politics.
Right.
And you try and talk to the legislatures, and they just laugh at you, which is
a shame because
it's disgusting,
Oh, it is. And I know some couples who have left, and they are just some of the kindest, most generous people you could. They're exactly who you want as neighbors. If you're sick, they're going to bring soup over. They watch out for your home if you're not around. It's just really, really good people, and it's so sad when we see those folks leave because they don't feel safe or comfortable in many cases.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Franklin Pride. Now, you and I, it kind of went through that together. I was at a different spot in that situation in Franklin, Tennessee than you were in, obviously. But I did my best to interject myself into that conversation.
Yes, you did.
As much as I could. Now, Robert, of all the places in the world that you could land and decide you wanted to have a Pride Festival, you picked Franklin, Tennessee.
It's not like I moved here to do that. But.
Now, is there a diagnosis for that particular mental illness?
Yeah.
What was your first thought? When you brought that up to someone, did they say you've lost your mind?
No. Actually, it started out really as it kind of morphed. So I had a Tuesday lunch group, and so I think Tracy and John Halloran and a bunch of other people. We would go to the Bungin' Up Pig every Tuesday for lunch, and conversations, we're always talking about what can we do, how can we help? We really wanted to do something to get involved, but didn't know where or how. And we talked about. Okay,
so I want to stop you right there, though. So you all were talking about what you could do, how you could help. Tell me what was making you feel like something needed to be done. Was the discrimination being felt more?
Yes. Because one of the topics was Grace Church, where, kids were being shipped off to reparative therapy.
Yes. And Grace Church happens to be where our governor is a member. Just want to add that in for the listeners to chew on that a minute.
So, me and my Irish dander, I wanted to just march right in there and say, no, you can't do this. But I didn't because I know they wouldn't listen anyway. So anyway, we just started talking. And then I actually became a member of the board on PFLAG Franklin first. And,
all right, so tell the listeners what that is.
Okay, PFLAG Franklin is a support group for parents who have children that are gay or transgender or whatever, and they don't really quite know how to deal with it. It's against their religion, or, whatever. They just don't know how to deal with it, and they find PFLAG Franklin. We meet once a month. And they meet other parents that have been through the same thing and find a way to keep their religion and their child. They don't have to throw the child out.
That's right. Wow. Seems so easy, but what was powerful?
Exactly.
It's powerful to
Love
give
the child.
someone a space to realize
and
that.
So for the kids, it's the lucky ones are that their parents find their way there. And not all of them do. So some of them end up in reparative therapy in Arizona or out of state someplace. And it's very rough. So when they asked me to be on the board of PFLAG, I said yes. In my first board meeting, I said, we need to have a Pride event in Franklin or in Williamson County.
Yeah.
And I was just going to piggyback off Nashville Pride and just have one event in Williamson County. I really wasn't thinking full on Pride. So I went to a couple of their board meetings, but they had so much on their plate. And I just said, okay, I guess we got to do it ourselves. So then the conversation was, well, I think if you put it out there, people are, just do it and the money will come. And that's what happened, so we finally did, we turned our little Pride committee into Franklin Pride and eventually became our own 501c3.
And what year was the first Pride Festival?
First Pride was 21.
Okay.
2021.
And when did the trouble start?
That was a couple of years in. The first 2 years were fantastic. That first year we had 4,000 people show up. We were expecting maybe 400 or 500.
And so the listeners know what I'm speaking of is, as you'll hear as you listen more to this conversation, the Franklin Pride Festival started off as a Pride Festival. You want to go, you don't, whatever, right?
Exactly right, yeah.
And then a couple of years in, some of our local politicians and some local people decided to put their sights on the Franklin Pride Festival and do everything in their power to shut it down.
Yeah, and it was mostly their biggest problem was drag queens for some reason, and I don't know, because that became a statewide issue was the drag, and Williamson County didn't shy away.
And Mrs. Doubtfire had been around a long time and wasn't bothering anybody, but then all of a sudden.
Exactly. I mean, they're just such great, wonderful, colorful entertainers, and but for some reason, all of a sudden they're scum of the earth, or it seemed like, in their eyes, and that became a huge problem. And there was one particular woman on the board of aldermen, an alderman on the Franklin board, a city council basically, but it's alderman here, that was hell-bent on shutting us down. And that toxicity, she spread that toxicity throughout the board.
And we can name her.
Yeah, Gabrielle Hansen. One of my favorite people.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I'm sure I'm one of her favorites.
Oh, I'm definitely on that list.
Yeah. So that
we're being facetious listeners.
Exactly.
She's not our favorite person.
Put a lot of energy into shutting us down, and it bled over to some of the other, because of 2 years prior to that, and we had drag at the first two. Right. And they kept saying, how can we trust you? How can we trust you? Well, we did exactly what we told you. We did not do anything that was not on our application or that they didn't know we were going to do. Right.
And for the listeners that don't know, so when you want to have a festival in the city of Franklin, you have to fill out an application through the city to have your festival. And there's a lot of questions on there about exactly what you're planning on doing. And if you meet all of those qualifications, then your group can have a festival in the city of Franklin. You can rent the park if you want to, et cetera. And for some reason, I don't know, I guess maybe just bigotry or a desire to look important and feel special, Alderman Hansen and a few of the others decided that all of a sudden they wanted to make trouble for Franklin Pride. And I think it may have actually started with some members of some local churches who probably didn't even know Franklin had a pride already for a couple of years.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden they saw something in the paper and they thought, drag queens, oh my God. And, they began to write letters and then come speak at meetings. And it was now dissecting it of what happened. It literally, for the listeners who were not here during all of that, it went from something as simple as, I just don't like that they have drag queens, to, oh my God, they're eating live beating hearts at the Pride Festival. It just took on this
everybody's
bizarre,
running around naked.
It took this bizarre life, like it was a big naked orgy with, recruitment booths for children, and none of that was true.
Correct.
But seemingly normal, mentally stable people were believing some of this. Yeah. And, former Alderman Hansen actually held up a picture in a meeting of aldermen, Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Mm-hmm. And she said, this is a picture of someone in a gay parade eating a live human heart, and this could happen here. Mm-hmm. Now, there were some laughs in the audience, because if the listeners will think about what I just said, you realize how absurd that is. That's like
of course.
A murder or like...
It had just happened backstage.
Yeah, or like an open heart surgery and somebody stole a heart and kept it alive. I mean, there's just no way that could actually happen.
Right.
But it was that ridiculous.
Yeah.
What was said. How did that feel to you?
You know, I think I just put on a tough skin. It's hard to hear it. You know, they threw a lot at us, but to me, it was just words. You know, of course, I knew it wasn't true, but to me, it's just verbiage. You know, there's just spilling garbage, and so.
What was y'all's reaction to that corporately as a group?
Well, we just all we could do was, you know, present our side of the story, and you know, and we pulled together as many people, allies as we could, and you know, and members of the gay community, and the Wilco Iris brought their teens. You know, they're a gay organization that caters to the teen crowd or the high school crowd. They came and spoke. You know, everybody spoke. We just presented our story as best we could, and then also threw in that the Constitution is on our side, and that's
always
my
a good thing to throw in.
It is, you know, that was my comment. I can see that we're outnumbered. However, you know, the Constitution guarantees me the right to speech and that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
and also there was some negotiation that had to go on to get the permit for the next year. Is that right?
Yes.
And what?
Well, in that year, so mostly the negotiation was that year, and even with all of that, we had already negotiated and met all of their demands. Yet they were still saying we had already promised them there would not be a drag show.
Right.
So the whole thing really should have never happened.
No, it shouldn't. And you know, the thing that struck me about it while it was going on and while I was at all the meetings and listening to everything was, you know, here we have a group who should not have to negotiate.
Correct.
Because the things that they said happened there did not happen there,
right.
But they should not have to negotiate. But in good faith, they said, okay, look, if drag queens are going to drive everybody crazy, we'll just do away with that because we still want to have our festival. And tell the listeners what the festival is. How big is it? What goes on there? What do people enjoy? Okay,
so the first year we had 4,000 people show up. And our biggest year was we had 7,000 people. So we'd grown a little bit. We were expecting this past year was a smaller crowd because we had rain the entire day, a lot of rain.
Rain really kept it. I think you would have had 10,000 if we hadn't had rain.
We were expecting upwards to 10,000. So and we're hoping that next year will be our 5th anniversary. So, so it's a lot of smiling faces. We have food trucks. We have music. We have, you know, 2 stages. So there's music constantly. Somebody's on stage, you know, from one stage to the next.
And listeners, we're not too far from Nashville. The music is always high level.
Yes,
always.
That's correct. Yes. So, so food trucks, music, over 100 vendors every year. I don't know what else. Just traditional, you know, a beer tent, and reasonably priced. It's free to get in, free parking. The entrance is free. At this point, has been every year so far.
How many churches have booths?
We have at least 8 or 10 churches this year, that. And they've all reached out to us. We didn't reach out to any of them. We had 8 churches set up. One is a sponsor, and then the other are vendors, and they love being there. And you know, they are all affirming, and so yeah,
and it's so, you know, for the folks who are listening. I've never seen a gay pride parade in a big city like San Francisco or New York, Chicago. But whatever the image is that people have of those sorts of events, they somehow decided, oh my, that's going to be in Franklin at Harlansdale Park.
Right.
And now I'm not saying that those events are bad and wrong. It's just it might be. You know, I'm a little bit of an old lady. It might be a little much for me, but you know what? If I don't like it, don't go.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't bother me. I mean, the Rocky Horror Picture Show's a little much for me. I'm a little tender that way. But people had in their mind that that's what was going to be there, and that's not at all what it was. And that's why I asked you how many church booths were there.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
there's a lot of churches there.
And a lot of families, you
Yeah.
know, and what blew me away, especially that first year, but every year to follow, was the young families. So here are straight married families with 2 or 3, 4 kids. They're arriving with pushing a stroller.
Right.
And the young ones, you know, they're bringing them to Franklin Pride as a family unit and enjoying the atmosphere.
And, you know, I liken it. Someone asked me, they said, well, why would you go to the Pride Festival? You're not gay. And I said, well, I mean, I go to Oktoberfest. I'm not German. And I don't show up at Oktoberfest trying to think that somebody's going to recruit me to be German. I like beer and I go to the Oktoberfest, you know?
There you go.
And so the idea that someone's coming to the Pride Festival and, oh my God, they're recruiting, it's just absurd. There's not a recruiting tent. Let's get that clear.
No, we do not have that.
Yeah, we do not have that.
We did away with that before. That was part of the negotiation.
He's kidding. He's kidding.
No, we didn't have one.
And so, you know, that always just amazes me. I'm like, I mean, there are big Polish festivals in other cities. No one goes thinking, well, I'm not Polish, but I will be by the time I leave. It's absurd.
But I could hang out with the Polish.
Yeah, of course, and have fun and do some
exactly.
polka.
They're fun people.
Yeah.
And those queens are fun.
Yes, they are. Yes. But so it's I mean, it's a great festival, and so I will say to the listeners, what's the date for this year's festival?
June 7th.
June 7th. It's going to be at Harlansdale again. Harlansdale Farm.
5th anniversary.
5th anniversary.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the little controversies that have come up. Let's talk about mom hugs. Tell me who these moms are and why they're hugging people.
Oh, moms. The moms hugs is a group that of mothers that have empathy for other people. So these are mostly straight moms that have a gay or lesbian child, and they've embraced them. But they know all these other mothers that there's a lot of families that don't embrace their child. And so they're there to give hugs to kind of like a surrogate mom. You know, if your mom's not hugging you, come here, we'll give you a hug. And that's all it is.
They do it only if asked. Correct. They're not running up and hugging people indiscriminately.
Right.
But then while all these meetings of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen going on and people were saying things that weren't true.
Horrible. Yeah.
Then someone accused the moms of
groping
and being the same as a molester.
Inappropriate. Right.
Oh, and it's just so offensive.
It's very offensive. These are just wonderful, caring people that want to, you know, share the love.
Right.
You know, and if somebody's in need of a hug, and oftentimes people are, you know, they need a hug. They've been through a lot. You know, they get harassed at school. They get harassed at their job.
Right.
And they need a hug.
And maybe there are some, and I'm sure you know them as I do, there are some gay and lesbian people who have not had contact with their parents for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And if you're a 30-year-old lesbian and you haven't had a hug from your mom in 20 years, that can feel really good when a lady in her 50s says, you know, would you like a hug? You're a good person and I love you. And that's so important.
It is very important.
And that sort of expression of connecting with others goes on in our churches here all of the time. And it never takes on any connotation of anything ugly, you know. Sure. But because it was around the Gay Pride Festival, that got inserted into it. And you know, we won't go into the entire cast of characters that were involved in all of this in Franklin, but let's just say that it even included a former Saturday Night Live star. Yeah. And I mean, it just went on and became to just the point of complete and utter ridiculousness.
Yes, absurdity.
And I think it also, interestingly, started a path that our city needed to take, because Alderman Hanson, who kind of spearheaded much of this, you know, her bigotry and hatred didn't stop with the Pride Festival. Then she went after covenant parents and that sort of thing.
Right.
And I mean, it just kept on and on.
And Franklin Justice, FJEC.
Yes, and the Franklin Justice and Equity Coalition. So she went after everyone that she considered other, and it culminated in her running for mayor and then suffering a disastrous loss on her part. So I think sometimes when I think back about that period, I think it was a journey the city needed to take to see just how far something can go before we pull ourselves back and say we're losing our way.
Exactly. You don't see that at the time.
No.
When you're going through it, but looking back is, yes, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say all is good and well.
No.
But it is to say that we have found the limit, and the limit is apparently bringing Nazis into City Hall.
Exactly.
That's the line. Now, we need to move that line.
Yes, exactly right.
It was a long way for us to have to go, but... And so for listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, Google the name Gabrielle Hansen and you will read and see more about it.
Yeah, have lots of, there's a lot there to
and you can
unpack.
Google Gabrielle Hansen, Phil Williams, and then you can see all of reporter Phil Williams' stories about the situation. But all of that kind of started really, Robert, with the Pride Festival and all the uproar over that.
Yes.
And so it's a path that we took that was both very sad, but thankfully it had the right ending.
Correct.
No one at the city's hassled you about your permit this year. Is that correct?
Well, no, they haven't hassled us yet, but they haven't put us on the docket yet. We've placed our application, but we haven't been given a docket yet. So
now, when you say given a docket, what does that mean?
Well, so it's it's several month long process. So they look it over, make sure everything's right. We'll go back and forth to answer this question. Then it gets put into a work study, a work commission, work session. So it'll have to go through that. Then it's still another 3 or 4 weeks before it goes to the floor for a vote.
For a vote. And do they vote on that in an open alderman meeting? They do.
Yes.
All right. So will you get notice of when the work session is?
Yes.
Will you let us know?
Sure.
Are you expecting problems?
No. No, we're not expecting any problems this year because the same thing, the drag ban is back in place now, so basically we're not going to have a drag show once again, unfortunately, and I really hate that. We've caught a lot of flack from within the gay community as well for not having the drag shows. And some people even go to as far as say is we shouldn't have Pride if we can't have. And that's throwing, and we can't throw away the progress that we've made. But there's too many people here in Williamson County that need that space. I agree. And I can see how that's a difficult situation. It's a very difficult situation. But you're a good leader, and you're navigating that. You're navigating that. That takes a lot to get through that situation, because I can imagine. Yes, that's hard. It's not easy, and it's hard taking the shot from within as well too. Sure. But we have to do what we have to do. But you're right. Progress has been made. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so, I hope you'll let us know when the work session is, so that if anything does arise. So the last question I want to ask you is this. It's kind of a big question. If someone wants to fancy themselves an ally for the LGBTQIA plus community, what does someone do? What does your community need from people like me? We just need to know that you're with us. We need to show up every now and then. We have monthly mixers. Come to a mixer and meet people and let us know you're there. Get on our email list so that when the work session comes up, you can show up if we need somebody to stand up and talk for us. But we just need people we need the mayor and the board of aldermen to know we have a large allyship. And that's probably the biggest thing is just visibility and knowing, that there are this many people out there.
And so we do that by signing up for your newsletter, which I'm going to let you tell the listeners in a minute how to do that, and then showing up at these meetings if necessary.
If necessary.
And you will let us know through that newsletter, because I don't want an opportunity to go by that we don't know about where we can't be there for you.
Sure. And if it comes where it comes up sudden, we'll send out a blanket, request to show up.
Good, because I'm a member of a couple of Facebook groups, and so the last time all this got stirred up, I was alerted to the fact that, hey, you need to show up. And when I showed up, I thought, well, I'm going to sign up to speak. I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I'm someone that is a person who does other social activities with a lot of these aldermen, and I think they see me as a normal, reasonable person, and I need to be standing there for my friends.
And yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So, and that's all we need. You don't have to say a lot. Just say, I support Franklin Pride. I think you should give them the application. That's it. Yeah,
that's it. So where does one sign up for this newsletter?
Okay, so you can go to franklinpridetn.org.
Okay. franklinpridetn.org.
That's our website, and you can find a button there to either to donate or to there's a link there to sign up for the newsletter.
Okay. And then the newsletter would alert us to mixers and that sort of thing.
That's correct. Yes, we have monthly mixers.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
And there's also resources. If anybody in the community that is having issues, there's a lot of resources on that page as well. Okay. A resource page for counselors or whatever you might need.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, it's been a joy to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, and thank you for your openness and willing to discuss your own personal situation, but also thank you for your bravery, because I'm not sure a lot of people understand what it means to start an organization this big and this successful in Williamson County, Tennessee. But by golly, you did it, and you're still
with a lot of help with the original board members and the new board members as well. So
you're still doing it. Thank you. You're still in the fight, and we need you, and I need you to know that in the current political atmosphere, I want you to know that I realize it's more important than ever for us allies to actually be there, to show up, to speak up, to march, whatever it is we end up having to do.
Yes.
And I don't want you to hesitate to call on us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
And we appreciate you a lot. Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this chat with Robert McNamara, ninth child in the family of 17 is how he'll always be known to me.
9 of 17.
I'm just going to call you number 9 from here on out.
That's fine.
So this has been a great episode, I think, and I want you to share this with your friends, specifically if you have friends who are in the LGBTQ community who need to know that they're not alone, and then there's an organization here for them, and there are allies, and we're all in this thing together. I'll let them know about the podcast. And if you want to rate and review us, that'd be great too. And you can find Blue Lift on all of the listening channels and share it with everyone you know. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.